In the 2018 update to Adobe Creative Cloud InDesign, they added paragraph borders. And so we have paragraph shading that we just went over, but they also have paragraph borders. And that can be useful because the border moves with the text instead of it being a separate shape. However, there are some limitations to it, and I'll show you what I mean. So here's the paragraph panel. Remember, that's Window, Type in Tables, Paragraph. And we can click this top right-hand corner and go to Paragraph Borders and Shading, or we can click somewhere here in the text frame and click the top right-hand corner of the control panel here, and we can go to Paragraph Borders and Shading there. And it doesn't matter if we have the paragraph or the character mode set. Either way, we can click this top right-hand corner. Same option, Paragraph Borders and Shading. So either way. So once we go to Paragraph Borders and Shading, we can click Preview to set that, and click on border to actually add the border, and we'll notice it adds it, but this paragraph goes across two columns. So if we click display border if paragraph splits across frames or columns, then it will add that border at the bottom here and at the top up here. And there are some other options in here like offsets. So if we click that, it will increase from the edge of the text there, and we can decrease it and it will get smaller, of course. And if we want to increase just the top or the bottom or left and right, we can click the chain symbol there. That's the make all settings the same option. Then we can adjust one of those four at a time. We can also adjust whether or not the top edge is set to the cent. That's just a type anatomy term for part of the words there. So if we set it to baseline, it will move down to the baseline of the text, and that's not what we want for this example. And if we set to the ascent, it'll be right at the top there. And if we set to the leading, it will go up even a little bit more. So the default is ascent. The width, if we set it to text, if there are areas where the text is smaller than the column, then it will get smaller. On this, it's not as relevant because it's set to full justify. So the column width and the text width are pretty much the same except the last lines. And then the bottom edge, like right down here, it's by default the descent, but we can set it to baseline as well. That will bring it up though. Now we can change the corners to different styles, just like a normal rounded rectangle style. So we could click it to rounded, or we could select one of these other styles and we can increase it and make it a more obvious rounded corner there. And of course the type, so the same style options we have here. And we can also set a gap color if it's one of these that has a gap, like that. And we can adjust the tint and other settings. Now up here we can adjust the stroke. So if I keep all settings the same off and click the top, only the top area will get thicker, and we can adjust the bottom, left, or right. So I'm going to click cancel for now and just show one challenge with this tool. So I click this, or you can press W for a better preview here. Let's say if I click and drag around all of these paragraphs here. So we've got some paragraphs selected, and we go to the paragraph borders and shading, and we check border. Now notice that we have multiple borders here though. So if I click OK and click over here, that's not the effect we want for this example. So if I click and make sure it's blinking in this top paragraph, we can go back to the paragraph borders and shading. And for the bottom, for this part, we could set it to 0. And then it gets rid of that for that top one. And then I could make sure my cursor's in this paragraph, the bottom one, and go back to paragraph borders and shading. And for the top one, because we don't need that line there, we could set that to 0 points. And then for these two middle ones, I'm going to just click and drag so that we are affecting these two middle paragraphs at the same time. And I go to paragraph borders and shading, and I don't need the top or bottom there. So I'll click that to 0 and that to 0, click OK. And now it's a border around just that area. And that's a lot of work just to add a border, to be honest. Now we do have a little bit of space in between. So what we could do with those two middle paragraphs selected still, we could increase the offset, for example, the top for that one, and then the bottom. The problem is it goes down there a little bit there, so we could edit those separately if we wanted, but hopefully you get the idea. Click OK, and then now we have a border of some paragraphs. And if we don't want the text to touch the edge like that, we could select it all, and we could adjust the offset, of course. So on the left and right, we can increase that a little bit like that, and we could also click in this top paragraph, increase the top offset and increase the bottom offset there if we wanted. Now, it is neat that we can add text here, and it will add more. The problem is every time I'm pressing enter, it adds this border here. If I click over here, for example, and press enter, it adds another one. Now, I could click in here and select all the text in the entire story and go to the paragraph borders and shading. Now, we can set the top stroke to 0 point and the bottom stroke to 0 point and click OK. And that does add these left and right borders, and they're only single on the left and right hand column and then double on these, of course. But then there is no bottom border on each column, not just at the beginning and the end, but every single column. So we would have to manually go through there and add a top and a bottom border too in those specific paragraphs. The best context for using this, I think, is just using it in paragraphs like this that aren't in a story. Unless we're just wanting to add borders on the left and right hand side, there is a problem with the top and bottom borders between paragraphs in stories. So until they fix that, I think the best context for using this is, say we have a text frame like this, we can go ahead and add a border, and we can increase the offset a bit so it goes off the side like that. Click OK, and now we have a nice border, and we can change it here, of course. But for more settings besides the color here, we need to go to that menu, and we can customize it, make it thicker, and so on. And now that paragraph border is part of this text frame, so as I move it around, it's automatically paired with the text frame. And if I click and drag the corner, it'll change with it. Now, I do suggest just using a separate rectangle shape with a stroke and no fill, and click and drag around an entire story if we need to. That's still a better technique, I think, because adding borders to this would add it after every single paragraph. So again, if I just click and drag, if we had something like that, and then we added a border, make it a little thicker so we can see it here, and we can group this border, this rectangle here, with this paragraph. Just click and drag around both of these and go to Object, Group. The only problem is if we move this like that, it's not as responsive as just adding the border to a paragraph like this technique. So that's something to take into consideration. If we have short paragraphs like this, say a sidebar, or it's in a magazine or a publication or a restaurant menu, and we wanted to add a little bit of a border pretty quickly like this and have that border part of this text frame, we could add it with this technique. But adding borders to longer paragraphs, unless Adobe comes up with a fix for that, I do suggest just using the rectangle tool. Thanks.